Hi there. I'm Patrick. I'm the CEO and founder of Mindmaven, a coaching company that focuses on freeing up 12 hours or more of a founder or CEO's time by changing the way they work with an EA. And then we want to take that time and invest it into relationships because we believe that you don't know a single person who's been able to reach their fullest potential without help from others. It's just a state that doesn't exist. And so today we have another distinguished guest on our beautiful series of human first leadership. And many of our other episodes can be found at mindmaven.com. And so today I'm thrilled to basically welcome Harry Glaser here. Welcome.
Oh, hey, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
So Harry basically previously co-founded a company called Periscope Data. Some of you guys might have heard of it. Worked on the company for over 10 years, which is practically unheard of in the startup world, and then sold it for $130 million while it was 150 people strong. Now he's the co-founder of a company called Modelbit, and that is a organization, a tool that allows data scientists to rapidly deploy machine learning models.
That's right.
Feel about right? Okay. And
I
so
think you got the whole bit. That's right. That's true.
there you go. Awesome.
Just started on our second company. Very excited to be here. Thank you for having me, by the way, Patrick. It's
Hey.
great to be on the podcast.
Yes. And the reason you're here is because I got introduced to you by a dear friend of mine. And through our conversations, I really deeply resonated of how thoughtful you are with relationships. And it looks like leading companies with integrity and empathy has been one of your top priorities. And I think some of your insights will actually be really, really welcome
Well,
by
gosh,
our
that's very
audience.
kind. Thank you.
Okay, cool. So, hey, let's get going with the first question. I think nobody would argue with the fact that the tech industry has been through quite a bit of tumultuous times. And so one of the questions I have is like in times like this, how do you maintain a human first leadership, or how do you deploy human first leadership principles in times like these?
Gosh, I don't know if I have a top-down, all-encompassing philosophy. In some ways, I feel insulated from the chaos in the tech industry in the last year or so, just because after selling our company in 2019, which was a really painful process,
Hmm.
and then working at our acquirer for the next 2 years, which was also a really painful process.
Hmm.
And then through that time, we had the COVID lockdowns and the political drama in 2020. But after all of that, we were, taking a break and then starting a new company. And that's just me and my co-founder for a while. So we're in some ways sort of less aware of or less directly impacted by the stuff around us. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think, leading with empathy is mostly a matter of wanting to lead with empathy and then, having some well of experience, some reservoir to draw on. We were, not that I would wish painful experiences on anyone, but by the time I really felt like I had to call on, some experiences or something, somewhere to help me navigate a group of people through some crises, I felt like I had had some experience of previous crises to remember and all the things we had screwed up and all the things I wish I had done and all the sleep I lost. But I don't know that there's a philosophy or a silver bullet so much as wanting to do it and trying hard to do a good job.
How would you define human first leadership? What is
Yeah,
it
I
from
don't I
you?
don't know if
And
I have a definition. I think, there's a context in which you are interacting with these people. So for me, it's a company, right? We have a company. I'm the leader of the company. We're trying to achieve a business outcome. We're trying to build something, build some software, sell some software,
Mhm.
those kinds of things. But I think there's a recognition and a humility about the fact that the humans themselves and their journey through life and your relationship with them is bigger and more important than that. The humans and their journey through life is more important than your business outcomes. And so just bringing that humility to every interaction, understand. So, when you get up in front of the company to announce some news, good news about a quarter, bad news about a layoff, whatever, they're going to take that back and integrate it into a life context. They might be raising a family. They might be supporting their parents in another country. They might be trying to get a visa for somebody, right? And this news is getting integrated into a context for them that is about, it's not about you and your company and getting to the end of the quarter. It's about, does this, how does this help or hurt them in what they're doing with their family, right? What they're doing with their life. that's the real story. Your little thing at your business is not the real story. And so having some, not that you should, I mean, it takes quite a bit of perseverance and
Mhm.
competitiveness and drive and all these things to achieve business goals. And that is important. But to the person who is receiving the message from you, it is less important than I came here on an H-1B and I'm trying to bring over my family, or I'm trying to
Mhm.
send money back for my family, or
Mhm.
I'm trying to afford a house that's big enough to raise my kids in, like that.
Mhm.
That's the
Mhm.
thing. Your business is not the be all end all. I try to
Mhm.
remember that when I'm having these interactions. So that might be one helpful
Yeah,
context.
I find that actually exceptionally powerful because I would argue it's relatively unusual because most people would say, well, look, like, we're on a mission and we need to achieve that mission. In the context of our company, that is the biggest thing that matters. I have two questions, but the first one is how does that constitute itself in your day to day life? How do you live it rather
I
than
don't
just
think
thinking,
yeah, it's not rocket science. You just have it in mind every time you're interacting with somebody. I don't disagree with anything that you said, by the way, when you said we have a mission, we need to achieve that mission. And in the context of this company, it's the most important thing. That's true. And you
yeah,
will make hard decisions so that you can ultimately achieve the mission because that's the most important thing in that context.
mm,
But this is not the only context. It's not the only frame.
hmm,
And while the mission may seem all important to you, it's because it's your company and you started it and you run it. That's
mm,
not true for anybody else at the company. This is one step on their journey,
yeah,
right? They have another more broad context, and the journey is about achieving something for them that
mm,
exists beyond your company. And
mm.
I think maybe I'm repeating myself. And so your question was, how do you incorporate that into the day to day?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
because what you said was, well, you just do it, right? And for you, that is easy to be said because you have trained yourself, or maybe from who you are, it's natural to you. But I think a lot of people that listen to us right now say, "I want to be that," but it's harder for me because it doesn't come natural.
well,
So,
yes, that's true, and it's not right. I didn't wake up. Leadership is not a born skill, right? It's a
yes,
thing you learn. Um, and I certainly went through, many sort of. I don't want to oversell the trying times. I mean, you know, I- I've had a pretty good life overall. I've been very, very lucky and fortunate.
mm,
Um, but we went through some tough moments, and then and sometimes made them worse and didn't, wanted to learn from those experiences. And so but I think in terms of how, um, there are key moments that really matter and that you will really remember. And, key moments in the history of the company, like I've done a few layoffs in my time, one that was particularly painful because it wasn't market driven. It was my fault. And having to go through those moments,
mm,
and everybody remembers that. And so you really want
mm,
to bring that context to those moments, but then also there's key moments in the relationship with each individual, the recruiting process, any kind of termination process, whether they initiate it or whether you initiate it, touch points at critical moments, milestones, promotions, those kinds of things. And
mhm,
again, I would say, like, take a moment and really put yourself in their shoes. And I also think,
mhm,
I've been on the other side of this where, my partner comes home from a tough day at work and relays some story, and I'm all angry on her behalf. I'm angrier than she is at what down at her workplace, which in a context I don't even understand, in a decision I don't even understand. But I'm
mhm,
like, oh, you need to go back there and tell them blah blah blah. And
yes,
remember, when you are having a conversation with an employee, on the other side of that employee is a spouse who's going to say that, right? And who's grounded in the context of their family and their family's goals and their home life. And
yeah,
so you need to just, before you go into the room, take a breath and think
mhm.
about where they are coming from and what they want and what's important to them.
So let me throw in some sort of pragmatics that I like would distill from what I've heard you say. So there are two things that actually people can do. So number one is create a list of heavier processes that your organization has to run, like the termination of a person or any type of thing that is like a process that takes place regularly. Some of them we like, some of them we don't, and you probably are developing through HR and others certain standard operating procedures of how you
Right.
go about doing things. And so, one thing you can do very pragmatically is add the question, how is this process going to impact that person?
I think that's
Yeah.
right. And maybe another thing you can add to those processes is, how do we run this process in a way that's in line with our values? And is running this process in a way that's in line with our values more important than than some kind of tactical business outcome. And I'll give you an example.
Mm.
I've had, I've had to run a lot of unfortunate processes, and one is, terminating employees for bad behavior. And
Mm.
it's relatively common in the industry when you terminate employees for any reason to ask them to sign a separation agreement. You give them some severance, and in return, they agree to not say anything bad about the company, and they agree to
Mhm.
absolve you of legal liability and other things.
Mhm.
And we went at Periscope, when you've had truly bad behavior, and we can all imagine what that might mean,
Mhm.
especially coming from, say, a manager at the company who,
Yeah.
in those bad behavior actions, was unfortunately and wrongly representing the company.
Mhm. Mhm.
We just said, I'm not paying severance. We don't reward that. And I don't care if that means that we add legal risk to the company. The company is willing to accept additional legal risk in order to act in a way that is in concert with our values. And
Wow.
so this is not always in your control, but as the CEO of the company, you get to say which things are more important than your values and which things are not more important than your values. And I promise your customers and your employees are watching. It's totally okay to just go with the industry playbook, but just recognize you have the ability to not go with the industry playbook and to prioritize your values instead, if that's what you so choose.
Yes. To me, that feels like it's a statement of courage, and often courage does get rewarded. I had another thought of it. So you basically said, and again, this was a big example, and I really loved it because it's encouraging everybody who's listening. Is they're like, hey, maybe I can do that as well. Pragmatically speaking, there are also other processes that happen that might not be as heavy. They could be a
Sure.
lot more lightweight, right? Like whatever it is. But like whenever you are deploying a new process, before you feel like this is ready to be deployed, in the deployment process, have a standard approach of saying, does everything in here feel like it's aligning with our values?
Right.
Right. Again, very tactically, it's a very tactical tip, but before you say this is how we're going to do it, there needs to be a stop where it says, okay, let's do a quick value check on this before we deploy it. And then the other thing I just wanted to throw out is that the idea that came to my mind when you said, hey, you just do it, right? A lot of the examples you gave were heavy examples
Sure.
of where you keep the context of another person's life. And there it's really warranted. It's almost like sad when you not do it there. But I think a power move is to do it almost in a day-to-day basis. So,
Well, I
like
think, yeah,
when you have a meeting or with people, like if you can basically, before you step into the meeting, let's say it's not just a regular daily stand-up or just a weekly one-on-one, but there's maybe something that has a bit more weight to it coming up, just before the meeting, have a mini ritual of saying the things I'm talking about, what's the context of the other person? Here's
yeah.
mine. And if you make that a habit, I think by nature you will become much more of an empathetic leader like you already are.
I think
It's
that's,
you're right.
I think also, I think that's right. And I think it does become easier. Like it becomes second nature, right?
That's the
You,
point. Yeah.
you, you get hit in the head enough times with, wow, I tried to do that meeting on autopilot and they got really upset. And I didn't even
Hmm.
think beforehand why this might be upsetting news for them. you
Yes.
know, Announcing I keep bringing this back to heavy examples, and that's because those are the ones that stick in my memory. But,
Of course they
it's
do.
easy to assume that announcing that your company will be acquired is going to be good news for everybody because it's good news for you.
Yes.
And it represents some step towards the achievement of the company's mission, which to you is the all encompassing goal. But everybody's going to be wondering, what does this mean for my compensation? Do I
Hmm.
still have a job? Because everybody knows sometimes people are laid off in acquisitions. Are we
Yeah.
moving? Am I going to get a new boss? Is that new boss going to be good? And so mostly the way that people are going to be feeling is not congratulatory, but anxious, right? What
Yes.
does it mean? And if you don't have all the answers, you need to talk about when and how they're going to get all the answers. And so this stuff, just as you go through this stuff, and like I said, mostly for me, I don't know, maybe there's shortcuts, but for me, I mostly just fucked it up over and over again until I finally learned through paranoia to think about these things so much that it became second nature. So I think it's just practice, and I think it does become second nature.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And the best way to get anything to be second nature is by developing it habitually, making it habits, and you can't help it because you do it so often that you don't even need to think about it. And I think that's the key, and very few people deploy relationship based things in a habitual way. But for example, what you do is exactly that. And I think that's very powerful. I want to step into something you said earlier. You showed an amazing amount of vulnerability just earlier in our conversation here about saying that you had to do a round of layoffs, and the reason is because you fucked up. There's a bit of I want to drill into that a little bit because there's so much that goes into it. So in that situation, mm, you know, how can you go about this still in a way where you feel like you are aligning with the principles of empathy and of human first leadership in some form or other, right? Like,
Yeah,
and
it's a tough thing. Um, the particular layoffs that were hardest for me were the ones that were actually in a really good market, and we had not hit our number. We had not executed as a business as
Mhm,
well as we needed to, and as a result, we couldn't afford all of the people that we had working for us. We couldn't afford all their salaries, and so we had
mhm,
to make a plan to reduce. I think the number was something like 20% of headcount. Off a base of something like 120 or 150 people. And
mm,
I think, there's a lot has been written, some of it very good, about the tactics of that. And the tactics do really matter. And so I would encourage, I won't go into that here with you, but the
mhm,
order of operations, what you do when, those kinds of things
mhm,
really do, like, I would encourage you to really, really focus on that stuff and really get it right. But I think, um, the message is probably the thing where empathy become the message and the delivery of the message. And I think it begins with an acknowledgement that it's your fault, i.e., it's my fault. It was my fault because it was. As the leader of the business, as the CEO,
mhm,
it was my failure that led to other people losing their jobs, which is
mhm,
a relatively damning thing, as well it should be. I did such a bad job at my job that these other people are going to lose their jobs, and they're going to go
mhm,
home to their wives and say, there's no more salary coming. And and we have to scramble and figure it out. And maybe, honey, you could cover a little more for like these hard
mhm,
family conversations, these difficult situations. How are we going to make rent? How are we going to pay the mortgage? Were caused by me being bad at the job. And so this has to start with an acknowledgement and acceptance of responsibility with that. But there
mhm,
is also a flip side, which is the people who remain at the company are going to have their confidence shaken in that moment. And you're not going to
mhm,
fully restore all their confidence in one sort of all hands communication, but you can't leave them with this feeling of like, wow, Harry screwed up, and B, Harry really seems to be down in the dumps about it and really seems to be taking it hard, because then they're going to lose their confidence, and that's going to lead to a spiraling effect that's bad for everybody.
yeah,
And so you need to, in one moment, acknowledge and take responsibility for the screw up and how it happened and explain what happened. And then also announce a way forward for the people who are staying with the company in such a way that is confidence inspiring for them. And I've seen a lot of leaders screw up in both directions, right? Like just,
yes,
and I think it comes from that same point of empathy, which is, what do the people who are staying need to hear and feel in that moment in order to have as much confidence in you and in the business as possible?
yes. What do you do in that moment? Like, what is that fine line that you have to walk?
I mean, I think it's a simple, first you design a process that has as much empathy as possible. And that, that means notifying the people who are impacted first, in as empathetic a way as possible. I like to do it one-on-one, in person or over Zoom. I don't
Mhm,
generally believe in these sort of mass emails. I think there's been a lot of recently, as layoffs have become almost more normalized. I think there has been some leadership bad behavior where leaders don't feel personally responsible and therefore do stupid processes where they just send mass emails or something like that. I don't think that's necessary. So I like to do one-on-one with the person's manager or someone senior in person.
mhm,
Have some respect for the fact that that means that there's going to be a period of time where impacted people are learning, which means the news will get out. You want to minimize that time, but you accept it. Then you want to
mhm,
bring everyone to an all hands, and then you want to tell them what happened. And you want to
yeah.
tell them go ahead.
What do you do with those that are now have this shaken confidence in you and your leadership?
I think two, yeah, go ahead.
No, I
No, I
love
think
to
two
read
things.
it.
I think number one, you tell them what happened.
Mhm,
We We failed to, I'm just, as an example, as you may know, failed to hit our sales goal. That does unfortunately mean that we had to make some cuts because we can no longer afford all of the people, all of the salaries that work here. We did take the decision, me personally, I took the decision to make these changes so that we would be in a financially healthy situation. Then I would go into why we missed the sales goal and what happened. And then, and probably most importantly, I would go into what is the plan for the coming year such that that is corrected. And then and this is maybe stylistic, but I would end it on a personal note of why I personally am optimistic for the future, what it is. And I would bring that back to the long-term mission of the company, the values of the company, and why people joined the company, and
Mm,
give them an emotional reason to re-buy into the company at that point in time. So you've done the sort of what's happening. You've done the empathy for the people who are leaving, which is emotional about them. You've done the rational thing. Here's our tactical plan. Here's our financial plan, why we're going to hit this new number and succeed. But then you end with the empathetic, the emotional reason why they should buy in and be excited. And you can
mhm,
bring that back to the foundational values of the company and the foundational mission of the company that has
mhm,
not changed. And so
mhm.
therefore we remain inspired and excited about the long term.
Yeah, okay. What do you do with the situation, or how do you specifically address the situation that people in the audience you're addressing are wondering why you still are the CEO?
I mean, I think they will make a personal decision about whether they still believe in you. And that is a personal decision for them to make. Um, I think,
Y- But
go ahead.
I- you also want to convince them,
Oh,
or
totally. But
you
I
know.
absolutely agree with
So
that. I
how
don't
do you go about this
necessarily,
event? What
I
what
don't
have you
think you
done?
need to go ahead.
No, no, I'm just curious. What have you done in that particular situation? Because you must have addressed that in some form or another.
Certainly. I mean, it's pretty typical in those situations for, as a stylistic thing, and I recommend this, will always take questions from everyone in these forums.
Mm-hmm.
And someone feeling a little spicy, feeling a little burned on that day will raise their hand and ask why you're still the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you give a short answer about, um, what, specifically why. So you'll say, well, I, I came up short. I went to our
Mm-hmm.
board of directors and I told them we came up short, and I told them what my plan was. And the board of directors made the decision that they believed in the new plan and that they continue to believe in me as the leader of the company. And so that is the reason. But then I would also go into, I would go on from that into a more emotional, um, discussion of the mission of the company, and why I am glad they did that, because I started this company because I believe in whatever the mission is. And I believe in the values that we built together. And it remains my life's work to bring this to a wider audience and to bring this and I think, again, people, they need to feel validated by the question. And so you need to give the sort of tactical answer to the question, which is
Mm-hmm.
why, that we have a board, the board makes the choice, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But then people really make these decisions and make decisions about where they work and who they spend time with based on how they feel. And so you want to end with making them feel, or attempting to make them feel inspired. And then they'll make their own decision about whether they continue to feel inspired by the work, after all that's gone down. You will
Yeah.
lose some people after a process like this, and that's okay too. That's healthy.
Yes, I absolutely agree, right? And so for those that, for example, might generally struggling with sort of the classic imposter syndrome, those are times where that probably flares up quite a bit.
Yeah.
And one thing that I think is important to remember there is, even if you're a little shaking your confidence of being the right leader for your organization, that situation, which you probably have to deal with at one point or the other, you need to remember that you have probably the most passion for that business than anybody else on the planet. And you have to basically, anchor yourself with that particular knowledge, because it probably is true. And that passion is one of those things that we see time and time again is actually what's driving a company not only to survive, but to actually end up becoming big. And that might also help for those that basically have to face a situation like this.
Yeah. And I think, the imposter syndrome is real. I lost an enormous amount of sleep before the first, several nights before the first time I had to do this. But
Mm,
what I would say to anyone is, A, that's normal. Everyone does. And then B, be your authentic self up there. Don't watch videos of Steve Jobs and then walk in and try to act like Steve Jobs would, or whoever your favorite, business leader is, because the people in the audience they're in the audience because they bought in already, and they bought into you and they know you, and they don't expect Steve Jobs. They expect you. And what's really confidence shaking is when you get up there and act too brash or out of character or something like that. And people can tell you're putting on a show, and then you look like, so there's some reason why you might want to put on a show, and that's scary, right? Just
Right.
get up there and be yourself.
Yes. And give yourself permission to be yourself, even in the most dramatic situations like this one.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, people will sense it. Some people will actually cognitively recognize it. Most will actually just feel it on a subconscious level, but that feeling is icky, uncomfortable, and bitter.
Yeah.
And you will actually end up losing the one thing you have going for, and that is basically they genuinely believe in you and trust you. And
Yeah.
that's the thing you need
You do
most in
have quirks and
situations.
weaknesses, but the people in the audience have already bought into those quirks and weaknesses. They're not expecting that on this day, you're all of a sudden going to find,
Yeah.
a solution to that issue. I think they're just, they're hoping to hear genuinely from you what the
Yes.
hell is going on and what's the plan and why should we still be excited about this?
And most people are probably looking for a reason to stay, not a
Yes,
reason
I
to
would agree with
leave.
that.
Well, Harry, thank you so much.
Yeah,
This
it's
was
great
a
to be here.
great
Thank you so much
segment.
for the time, Patrick.
Awesome. Thank you, mate.